Let's call the meeting of the Thursday, May 9th, 2024 School Committee order. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, first I'd like to recognize Westwood Media Center, which is live streaming the meeting and also recording the later viewing on its platforms. Anyone else looking to videotape tonight? Seeing none. So this is our annual reorganization of the school committee where we reorganize our positions of chair, vice chair, and clerk. Do I have a motion to for somebody to be the new chair of the school committee?
I move that we elect Amanda Phillips as chair of the school committee.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? None? Unanimous. All right, I'm moving.
All right.
Thank you.
Do I move?
Yeah. It's musical chairs.
We're all moving, right?
We're all moving? Okay.
We're all moving. We're all moving.
Very exciting.
You
Why
stay.
am I
the only Feels weird to be
Yeah, I know.
to the
Pretty good.
left.
Good.
Sorry. It's a little less room.
Tony, I think your name makes. Okay.
Did I take my own hand? Oh, it's okay.
All right.
Okay.
Take it away.
So now, does anybody want to vote to elect the vice chair?
I move to elect Maya Plotkin as our vice chair.
I second. So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Do I get to vote? Oh, anyway.
Great.
All right.
And then does somebody have a motion to elect our clerk?
I move to elect Dory Parmalee as our chair, or excuse me, as our clerk.
Whoa.
All in favor? Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great, thank you. So I'd like to hand it over to, actually, my first order of business. I'm sorry. I can't take over without acknowledging Tony and all of the work that he's done. So Tony, thank you so much for your leadership this year. Just a few highlights of what's been accomplished during your time as chair. Onboarding Tim and supporting him to hit the ground running. You successfully your leadership allowed for the district to successfully push back start times at the high school. That's been met with rave reviews all around. What an impact this has and will continue to have for years to come. The opening and merging of 2 communities into the Pine Hill School and presenting a solid budget with an increase in mental health support and a long wished for Director of Human Resources allocation. That's just to name a few. And you did all of this while holding our meetings in record time. So thank you.
Thank you.
Forgot
Thank
to
you.
mention handling public participation.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you,
Oh,
Amanda.
we have something small for you.
Oh.
Hang on, I need to.
Just to keep it
Oh.
going.
Thank you.
I'll read what it says. It says, what does it say? Chair, Anthony Mullen, Westwood School Committee 2023 to 2024.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yay.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now I'll hand it over to Tim.
Sure. Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Tony, too. As coming on board as a new superintendent this year, having your guidance leadership as chair, I've really appreciated as well. And Amanda, I look forward to working with you as the new chair.
Thank you.
So first thing on the agenda tonight is I want to recognize our Westwood High School academic decathlon team. Thank you for being here tonight. Under the guidance of advisor Ms. Waive, the team has now qualified for nationals for their 2nd consecutive year after finishing as the top small school in Massachusetts at the state event and the 4th overall school in the state. I believe you had 5 medal winners at the national competition. Got to go to Pittsburgh and hang out in Principal Davenport's hometown. As a fellow Rust Belter, it's a destination unlike any other. So, but congratulations to all of you. We're actually going to have you come on up here tonight. I will read off your names, and then Amanda will have you present the certificates, and then I think we'll take a picture with everybody if that works. So Jason Guo. Rachel Lee. Luke Lee, Jason Lin, Jeffrey Pan, Aaron Wakab,
Not here. We'll clap anyway.
Jessica Wong, and Adrian Wong. So congratulations to all the members of the academic decathlon team, and I think we're going to pause for a picture now if we can. So.
Want to get in it, Tim?
Yeah.
Just the chair. You got it, Chair.
You don't want to be in the picture?
Is that far out of
Plenty of room.
Plenty of room.
Yes.
Sean, you too.
the sorority squat?
All right, Sean, I'm gonna need you to duck, Sean.
Oh.
I think that's really gonna do it. Choose 1, 2, 3. Good job.
And I was going to say, while you're all welcome to stay for the meeting, you also don't have to stay for the meeting. So.
Thank you. Thank you.
We should. Bye, Sean. See you guys. Good one, guys.
Popular.
So just a couple of other sort of brief things before I get into the facility study update. We are currently still in the process of hiring the Pine Hill principal. We are imminently close to being able to announce a decision in that process, so we will do that as soon as we possibly can, but I just want to provide that update to the community. We are also moving forward with our director, the aforementioned Director of Human Resources search, and we'll have more to say about that in the near future. In the meantime, I do want to jump into our facility study update and then talk about sort of the educational visioning work that's happening alongside of this. So as a general overview, and we've talked about this throughout the course of this year, is that we're developing a comprehensive facilities plan, and that plan, to kind of specify it, has two major components. The first is an itemized capital improvement plan that goes through our buildings, identify what our needs are as it relates to things like roofs and windows and boilers and security and technology outfitting in the building. How do we create the learning environments for our students to be able to succeed? That's sort of the wish list and to-do list that will guide our annual and basically allocations at town meeting, our annual asks at town meeting. The second part of this is develop a master plan with options for future building projects. And I think it's important to talk about how we want to socialize this in the community. We're not looking for a whole bunch of people to sit behind a wall in a room and say, this is the direction that we're going as a district. We want there to be able to be options on the table. We know, and I've said this, I think, a billion times since I entered the district last summer, we know about the significant amount of needs we have at Sheehan. We know about the significant amount of needs we have at Thurston. And what we want to do is we want to look at options for how we can address these in a sequence and an order that makes sense to try to meet our educational and facilities goals for our students. Happy to announce that, and I talked about this at the April meeting, that Doran Whittier has been hired as the designer to develop this plan. We obviously know Doran Whittier. They were the designer on the Pine Hill project, which was obviously very successful. And a parallel procurement has occurred with Town Hall to study municipal facilities. So they'll be working with both the school department and Town Hall, but these will be two separate independent reports that are generated, one for the school department and one for municipal government. I've also say this a lot, school buildings are only as valuable as the kind of education they can support inside of them. So it's important that we really engage in the educational visioning process to talk about where do we want to go with teaching and learning in the district in order to inform the development of these master plan options. Throughout the course of the year, we've talked about wanting to engage in this really large-scale visioning about where we want to go as a district this spring. Unfortunately, due to the timing of the way this has been procured, knowing that we are already in the second week of May, school is letting out in a few weeks, we aren't really able to adequately do the kind of full-scale visioning that we had originally hoped to do this spring. So our Phase 2 visioning, which is about the development of the portrait of a graduate, we're going to push off until this fall. What we do want to do this spring is to focus on teaching and learning environments. We're calling that Phase 1 visioning. Doran Whittier will lead us through that process. so that that can help inform the development of these master plan options. So the first part of this I just said a second ago, we want to do this work this spring. And in conjunction with them going into our buildings and assessing our existing facilities, it's going to allow us to develop those two components of the master plan, a capital improvement plan and master plan options for future building projects. And I sent an email out on Tuesday. We're still looking for a significant amount more response, so I'll be sending this out again tomorrow morning, looking for stakeholders to be assembled to include educators, family members, and students, one group each at the elementary, middle, and high school level. We had sent this originally on May 7th with a deadline of May 10th. If we don't get enough people, we will kind of extend it, but we wanted to try to get enough out there. There's one initial 1-hour meeting that will take place on Thursday, May 16th, and then two 2.5-hour meetings with each grade span group. Just to address one concern that I've heard, we are doing these during the day. We realize there may be a challenge with working parents, working family members to be able to access these. Given the fact that we need to make sure that we have educators and family members and do this in a short period of time, we have not been able to sort of schedule multiple different venues or opportunities for parents to get involved. In our phase 2 visioning in the fall, we will want to make sure that we provide multiple access points for dates and times for families to be able to participate. Our phase 2 visioning, which is this work about developing the portrait of a graduate of the Westwood Public Schools, is about really identifying the skills and competencies and mindsets we want our students to have to prepare them for their success in the future, for college, career, and life. And again, we'll bring together stakeholders from across the community, and this will form the basis for our new district strategy for how we support students from preschool all the way through high school. That will be the development of our district strategic plan. We will be developing a bridge strategic plan for the 24-25 school year. I know we've talked about that previously. But this new plan that we will develop throughout 24-25 will be informed by this vision. I want to go back to an entry plan finding that I had back in November when I presented my entry plan to the committee. And I'm not going to read all of this. This is up here on the screen for background. But I talked about there was a real opportunity for us to create a new educational vision for us as a school system centered on the development of these skills and competencies. And particularly that first bullet, which talked about how so many people, when I came into the community, talked about our schools are great, our schools are strong. And when I was asked, why are they strong? The answers were about test scores or school rankings or college admissions, and not really about what students know and are able to do. And I'm excited that the envisioning work that we're going to engage on next fall is really about answering those questions with clarity. What do we want our students to know and be able to do? And that third bullet is about really making this a more inclusive process. And so that key question is about having the conversation about what do we value here in Westwood as being essential for our students' future success? How do we define those expectations? How do we measure if we're successful at those expectations? And how do we share that progress with our community? And it gives us the opportunity to identify the strength of our system in a manner that's consistent with our shared values as a community. So to that point, I do just want to take a second and address external measures and rankings. Right? I know there's been some conversation around this. And because we have lacked a clear internal definition of what we say we value for success in Westwood, it's understandable that people find external measures and rankings as value, right? Whether it's Boston Magazine or US News or Niche or Great Schools or any of these. And these rankings are based upon individual data items that have value, things like MCAS scores, access to AP. But the way that they're aggregated, the way that they're ranked, reflect decisions about priorities made by rankers and not based upon what we believe we value in Westwood. So when we talk about the work that we're going to do, we want to talk about what do we value? How do we define success based upon what we value? And so just an example that's there is, the large-scale rankings, I know the April 24 US News rankings came out. They're based on data that's about our past and not our present. They're from 21-22. And during that time, we wanted to make sure that we addressed the post-pandemic learning loss that students experienced. And we can be proud about the fact that we addressed the impact in math, that for 3 straight years we have not had any students not pass, that's a double negative, that all of our students have passed the math MCAS. But that's not reflected in the rankings, right? Or for the fact of the matter is, when we look at these things, they look at AP scores. But the fact that we're offering a Calc 3 class in multivariable calculus doesn't count in rankings because it doesn't have an AP class attached to it, right? So the value of success for external rankings is based upon other people's priorities and not ours. And I'm excited about the opportunity for us to define for Westwood what we value and how we share those successes with the community. So, so that's the visioning piece on mass. In terms of our immediate next steps, so the phase 1 visioning stakeholder groups are going to happen in May and June. From June through August, we're going to have teams of people coming through our buildings and looking at, you know, behind the walls and all the kinds of stuff that has to happen there. We'll have a draft capital improvement plan in October that will inform the development of our FY26 capital budget. And we'll have a draft report with master plan options in December. After that, that's when we'll start socializing with the community. We'll do the community presentations, we'll gather feedback, we'll gather input so that we can decide collectively how we want to proceed as a plan to address our facility needs across the district. And then that phase 2 visioning work will happen in fall of 24 with the development of a new strategy in winter to spring of 25. There is a whole lot in there. And so I want to pause and present the opportunity, or provide the opportunity for all of you to ask questions or make your comments about this. But I thank you for your attention to this evening.
I think what might be helpful is to, especially if we're looking for people to join the visioning team, is to distinguish this from the Deerfield Reuse Advisory Committee. I know we got a great response to that. And I think people might be a little confused. And I think also maybe clarify the time commitment. I know you said one initial 1 hour and then 2.5 for each grade level.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if everybody is therefore going to be attending 6 hours of meetings, or, you know, so make it a little bit clear what the expectation and what the role of this group is.
I appreciate that. And what I send out tomorrow morning, I'll make sure that that's has greater clarity to it. So thank you for that feedback.
The other resident question I got was, are you looking for parents to participate, the people on the committee, whatever we're calling it, both visioning, or is it too discrete?
They're two discrete. There may be people that will do both.
Yeah.
But it's not a requirement to do
Got it.
both.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
the question. Okay, thank you.
And related to the rankings, so I wonder, does the typical, like the US News rankings, do they take into account outcomes, like what colleges kids are getting into or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, different metrics use different rankings, but like US News, for example, they look at AP participation, look at AP scores, they look at MCAS scores, they look at graduation rate. They do not look at post-secondary, like what colleges students are going to. They don't look at what levels of success students have in college. None of those things are part of their metrics.
Any other questions?
I don't think so.
All right. Thank you all. Appreciate it. The last thing that I want to mention, actually, you know what? Let's do this. So, Sean, this is your last meeting as our student representative. We've really valued having you here this year, and we know that you are off to Cornell and enjoying the glamour of upstate New York. And so we are here, as an upstate New Yorker, I can say that. So we're happy to present you with a token of our appreciation for your time on the committee.
I have to do another picture, sorry. Hold it up and it's gonna.
This time Sean doesn't have to duck.
Don't, I got you out, Joanne.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you,
So
Sean.
thank you,
Thank
Sean.
you, Sean.
And we certainly wish you all the best.
Thank you so much.
So with that, I think with your approval, Amanda, we are going to move up the World Language Curriculum Review, if we're good with that?
Yes, absolutely.
Try not to wreck stuff
And for folks who don't know, this is Hillary Carpinella, our Department Head of World Languages.
Hi,
Fantastic.
welcome.
Thanks. And let me hold my, you know what? It'd be a lot easier to do this if I have my glasses.
Would you like a clicker?
That would be cool too. Okay. So Hillary and I are going to kind of tag team around
I don't have a port to plug the clicker in, so you just have to let me know.
You wanna-
Sorry.
We'll just, you Vanna White it for us, that'd be awesome.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Well, you need to borrow shoes from. So we're excited to be back doing this. It's been a while since the World Language Program was reviewed in Westwood. I think we had said like 11 or 12 years. In
I
fact,
believe
it's
so.
a long lag. I think the pandemic slowed things down, and it's been an interesting process, and one where I think we've landed on some things that I hope are priorities that'll help move the district forward as we go. So let's go ahead and introduce the team. So we had, just like other review processes, we tried to get a group of folks together, including parent, a student representative, quite a few educators, school committee rep, and some administrators, and elementary principal, Deb Gallagher, who's around here. So, hi, Deb, who joined us in part because some of the conversation we really wanted to have was about, when and how is it possible, what would it look like to expand to elementary at some point. We can plow ahead. Just as a reminder, we have kind of a review cycle process that we go through, and you've been around, all of you, for a little while, so you know we've been through some recent reviews, including library media and digital literacy and computer science just this fall. Mathematics last year, social studies and wellness kind of landed before that. We had a little blank in there during pandemic years, and we're actually about to go around the horn here. So visual and performing arts will take place next year, and then we're going to loop back up to science and engineering. So that will be back on the table if the cycle continues after that. If you back up for just a second, I'll do a quick high level. Some of the things we actually do during the review I've listed out there. So we look at the DESE curriculum framework and guidance from the Department of Ed, because that is sort of our roadmap, our mandate in terms of what we're doing. I have to say the world language standards it's very new, and they look kind of different from the other standards. Most of the standards that you look at are very sort of content specific. These are they're broader, they're kind of more conceptual in nature. We looked at our own internal curriculum maps. We did some pretty extensive surveying and got great results from that. We looked at the configuration of other programs in other districts. When do they start? What languages do they offer? How frequently do they offer those languages? And then finally, a visit to Holliston, which is a district that's been well regarded for its programming, but particularly for the early start. They start all the way in kindergarten and go all the way up, and they've had that in place for a very long time.
Yeah.
So folks went to do a boots on the ground visit and see what we could learn. And
it's my turn. We decided that it would probably be worth it to read the vision statement that we came up with, and it's a little longer than some other vision statements, so bear with me. All students in the Westwood Public Schools are engaged in regular immersive world language study. By the time they graduate, students feel proud of what they have achieved, confident in their skills, and excited about the opportunities that proficiency in another language has created for them. They see their language skills as something they can continue to develop over a lifetime. Beginning in elementary school, children build proficiency as they talk, sing, and play games regularly in the target language. Through middle school, students speak and listen with increasing skill and confidence in the target language. They interact with peers and teachers and learn to navigate family, school, and social contexts. In high school, they communicate with native speakers, engage with authentic sources, and read and write progressively complex texts in the target language.
And there's more.
In learning to communicate in another language, students express themselves, take risks, make mistakes, and develop skills to support one another as learners. Students strive to stay in the target language, learn to ask for help, persist with support, and build confidence as well as skills through their efforts. Throughout their years in school, students engage with diverse cultures. They converse with native speakers, explore and make connections within communities where other languages are prevalent, travel to other countries, and enjoy frequent opportunities to learn about the art, food, music, history, religion, and contemporary issues of non-English speaking communities. Over time, students develop awareness of and sensitivity to the nuances of language and culture. They learn to navigate interactions with respect and consideration for others. This was you.
This is I do want to say, part of the reason that vision statement was so kind of robust is I think it
it really hits on these big picture things that we ended up talking a lot about. You know, what does language study look like as kids progress through their education? What else does language study do for you as a person and as a thinker? And how does it help kind of our community and our world when people study each other's languages? Were kind of some of the things we batted around. So other big themes that came out here, you know, these are the really important ones. First, obviously, the earlier we can start, the better in terms of kids' long-term proficiency. We really talked about that quite a bit. And that has been a recommendation that keeps coming back time after time when there's a review. I think the thing we did talk about is the challenge of implementation of that recommendation. It's a cost item, we know it's a cost item, and we tried to sort of talk a little bit in the report itself about how it might be phased in or approached so that you can sort of build it out in a way that's sustainable over time.
Yeah.
The second thing we talked about were curriculum resources, really providing the program in all kind of levels, but especially the early learners in French and Spanish and Mandarin with some high quality kind of resources so that there's consistency across classrooms and so the program builds well year to year. And then finally, the fun one, immersive experiences. How do we provide kids with more opportunities? And I know the superintendent's been very supportive of this, starting to explore, can we get back to talking about some travel opportunities? Are there ways we can get more people coming in to talk with students who are speakers of another language or who are members of another kind of community and can share those experiences? So, was I doing elementary too? Oh, thank you, keeping me on track. So we only had 2 recommendations at the elementary level because currently there is no elementary program, at least not officially here. I know we have in the past, from time to time, I know the principals can back me up, sometimes there'll be a small like exploratory program that runs as one of the after-school programs or PTO-sponsored programs at the elementary. But you know, the top recommendation, obviously, we want to be able to introduce languages at the elementary school with enough regularity to impact proficiency. That's one thing we really walked away from the review process with. There are districts where kids start early, but they don't access the language, they don't use the language frequently enough to actually impact where kids end up by the end of their studies. We felt like if you're going to build a program, it will be really important to build one where there's enough touch points at elementary that it kind of impacts and everybody gets to get a little bit better and closer to fluency over time. The other recommendation was really just to make connections between our older language students and younger ones. Once you've introduced elementary programming, I think elementary kids love older students. They think they're so cool. You're way cooler than we are, Sean. And so anything we can do to sort of connect those groups of people. It's also a great leadership opportunity for our older kids. And now you're up.
Yep. So for middle school, we had 4 recommendations. I'm going to touch on the first 2 here and then talk about the others because they're kind of more district-wide later. So the first is to expand our middle school program, which is currently only full-time in 7th and 8th grade, to be full-time also in 6th grade. And then along with that, we would like to offer Mandarin at the middle school starting at the same time as French and Spanish. And by doing both of these recommendations, students will attain higher proficiency levels in whatever language they take, allowing for more electives later on and more post-grad opportunities. At the high school, we also had 4 recommendations, and again, I'm going to concentrate on the first 2 for now. The first one is to explore the possibility of increasing the high school world language graduation requirement from 2 to 3 years. I've done a little bit of side research on this, and the schools that have a 3-year language requirement, many of which are like Boston Latin and schools like that, or charter schools, have a much higher percentage of students who attain the seal of biliteracy. And that would also allow for us to increase world language elective offerings, which gives students more choice to explore specific classes tailored to their interests and/or career aspirations. And then our district level recommendations, we had several. I'm going to touch on just a couple that kind of fell throughout. The first has to do with curricular resources, which was one of the themes that Allison pointed out earlier. high-quality curriculum resources will support rigor and coherence, as well as ensure alignment vertically and across classrooms, which is something that we've found to be slightly lacking right now. And then the other one, kind of meshing three together here. Field trips, travel opportunities, and engaging with community members who speak the target language. And by doing all of those, it will allow students to use the language outside the classroom and with native speakers, increasing cultural awareness and understanding of history and politics of different communities.
You're up. So we wanted to just highlight some of the upcoming sort of steps that we could see over the arc of the next kind of summer, school year, and the following summer. So really this looks at the beginnings of a timeline that is further elaborated in the report itself. And, you know, this summer it's really about getting started with mapping and doing some work around cohesion with curriculum resources. So really trying to, I know that, and the department's already started this work of kind of exploring some of those resources and doing some piloting next year so that we can kind of choose something that's going to be good over time. It's sort of a tricky dance right now because a lot of those resources have gone online, which is great in some ways, not super cost effective, I will say. The old days of textbooks in some ways were actually, you know, you invest once and then you keep it for a while, right? The thing about the online resources, they ratchet up the price every year, so you're always sort of chasing them. Next year, it's really about kind of digging into that pilot. Really, one of the things that came out that we didn't talk about so much here was standards-based grading. Our classes at the high school are proficiency-based already, so they're kind of in a mix where they use a close to a standards-based model, but we're having to kind of graft that together with the traditional ABC type of grading scale. So helping the teachers navigate that more smoothly. They all asked for more support around that. We want to talk about international travel, and one of the things that came up is the possibility of maybe looking at J-term as a time of year where some of those trips could take place, and having J-term experiences that are connected to travel seemed like an interesting idea, worthy of exploration. Starting to develop some new possible electives and engaging in community outreach around the seal of biliteracy. This is actually kind of a big deal, and we've tried to push it a little bit. We think there's more work we can do on this front, but essentially attaining that seal really positions kids to have other opportunities in terms of their college and career kind of future, and we want that for sure. You know, language knowledge is something that gets you access to a whole other universe of things out there in the world, and you know, I think it was Tim that told the story about. Did you tell the military story, or is it somebody else? It's another person.
I tell a lot of stories.
You do. I mean, there are a lot rattling around in there. Yeah, there was this great story somebody told me about recruiters for military service who kind of coming into a room and saying, all right, who speaks this language, who speaks this language, and those people stay, and the kind of number of possible opportunities to advance more quickly in those roles is really, really high. So the following summer, so not this summer, next summer, it's really about curriculum writing, refining those maps, and then starting to really talk seriously about what would it look like to expand programming into grade 6. We wanted to give that a little bit of timeline, give Principal Redmond a head start thinking about what would that mean for the schedule, because if it's going to expand, you have to find a place for it, right? You can't get something out of nothing, so this would give a little time ahead to begin that conversation. All right, I got a long one to read here. I love this. This kind of summarizes a lot of the things that, I mean, there are many things that are cool about studying a language, but I love this bit of research. It says students who are learning a second language later in life, so these are people who are not born or coming up in families where you're already bilingual, can still benefit from some of the neurological changes that happen to speakers of second languages, no matter what level they are at. Having new experiences, novelty, is an important factor in forming new connections in the brain and strengthening nervous system links. These links and connections are maintained through regular practice. Studying a new language combines novelty with practice. For example, students learn new words and grammatical constructs, and spend time reviewing and building on their previous knowledge as part of that learning process. This combination is one of the reasons that language learning is such an effective brain workout. So if you hear the things in there, they're sort of the same hallmarks that you hear around math study, around music study, a kind of combination of kind of a new idea, practice, that really helps with cognitive development. So why learn a language? You get smarter. That's sort of the summary of it. And here are some of the results. These are some of our Honor Society kids that we, from the high school. And that's it in a nutshell. So if you have questions, thank you so much for your time.
So this is great. I do have a question on the visioning statement.
Yes.
Is that aspirational? Is that what it is?
When we do visioning, the goal is what would we like to see in 3 to 5 years?
Okay. I'm trying to figure out the timeline for that. So that's helpful because
it's not tomorrow.
Or even next year.
Even next year. Yeah, we understand that. I mean, the budget, and that's always the issue with this expansion question, especially as it comes up over and over again. You know, how do you plan for it ahead of time? And that's when we put together the timeline, we really thought about what would a reasonable timeline be. We know kind of what the fiscal climate is right now. We know some of the challenges that exist. We know some of the other priorities within the district. So bumping out kind of things in a way that felt responsible is what we tried to at least give a model of for you all to consider.
That bilingual literacy.
The seal of biliteracy.
Yes, thank you for that. Is that something that students currently have access to and you're just looking to expand the access? Okay,
Yes.
I wasn't sure. Okay.
Yes, we currently offer testing for the state seal of biliteracy to all juniors enrolled in language. So they can earn it in French, Spanish, Mandarin, or Latin through the school. And then we also offer it out to students who speak another language at home, and they can test in that language. And our juniors this year are currently, we have 11 who have earned it, 3 who have earned it with distinction, which means they tested advanced low instead of intermediate high, and several others who are retaking 1 or 2 sections to try to earn it.
And the biliteracy, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, in addition to speaking another language, they have to actually have literacy skills in terms of reading and writing in the other languages.
That's correct. They're
Yeah.
tested in all 4 domains of the
Oh,
language:
so
reading,
speaking,
writing, listening, and speaking.
Right.
So do you have a sense, like when you went out to visit Holliston, how many of their students are graduating with that?
So when we, Latifa is laughing because she was with me. When we went to visit Holliston, we had very high hopes. And when we got there, this is what Allison was alluding to with the regularity of a program. We did not find that their elementary program met regularly or consistently enough, or it wasn't structured well enough that their kids were any higher than ours.
Got it.
Do they have an immersion program?
Yes, we did not look at the immersion
Okay.
program because we really wanted to focus on how we can give access to all of our students to start
Right.
language earlier. So we focused only on their FLES program, which is Spanish. And so that was what we discovered through that. But they do have a French immersion program.
And Milton does too, I think.
Correct.
Yeah.
do.
Yeah. And we spent some time talking about immersion programs. They're obviously, if you want to really learn a language, that's a great way to go. They're really complicated to run and expensive to
Yeah.
run, in part because if you think about the implications, not only are you recruiting and hiring teachers who can teach across content area in the target language, you also have to provide materials in the target language. So you have to find social studies materials in French, for example, things like that, all the way up as far as you are running the curriculum.
I believe that most immersion programs grow through 8th grade.
Yeah. So there,
Yeah.
it seemed like a thing that would be certainly worth exploring at some point, but maybe a higher bar and kind of getting at some of this, just developing an elementary program first felt like
Yeah,
a
I
good
think
first
I
step
would agree with that.
from the perspective of the committee.
Yeah.
Actually, 6th grade felt like a great first step. And then, you know, so we're kind of like, then everybody baby steps.
Baby steps, but thinking about those baby steps, can you, and I had the benefit of being on the committee and I really enjoyed walking through this exploration with you. But can you paint for the rest of the committee what an elementary school program could look like, what the amount of, the amount of time, the frequency, that sort of thing that could have a meaningful impact?
Yeah.
I think I brought it with me. I don't know if I did though.
Good.
No, I didn't.
That's okay.
Yes, I did.
Oh, yeah.
So I mean, our first kind of initial thoughts were to move out the language program backwards. So sixth grade, and then move down to fourth and fifth grade, and then move down to K to 3. And what we kind of thought was it should include frequent meetings of 20 to 30 minutes per day, 3 to 5 days a week for K to 3, and 5 days a week for 4 and 5. And then sixth grade would be a full time, just like the 7th and 8th graders meet. Currently in Holliston, the kindergarten meets once a week for 45 minutes, K through 2. Third grade is, I believe it was 3 times a week, maybe for 30 minutes. And then fourth and fifth is 5 times a week for only 25 minutes. And it just wasn't enough to sustain their language acquisition when they got to the middle school.
And if we did push this down to the elementary, would we offer French and Spanish, and potentially if we include Mandarin, or would just be one language?
I mean, I think the hope is to offer whatever core languages we offer at the high school so that all the students get the same benefit.
Yeah.
But obviously that comes down to staffing and fiscal responsibility.
I mean, one of the reasons for the recommendation to pull Mandarin into the middle school is Mandarin enrollment at the high school we think is low, not because of a lack of interest, but because our starting languages at the middle school are French and Spanish.
Right.
So if kids have to either restart or pull a second language, it's harder to get kids on board. But I think there's high interest, as is evidenced through, there's an entire Chinese language school in Westwood that runs a really robust program, because there's a community out there that would like us to do more, I think, so.
Yeah, and I mean, to that end, we actually did some surveying and we got feedback, and we had some indication that there was a lot of interest in expanding. If we were going to expand, Mandarin would be the language, to expand and to include.
People were interested in a lot of other languages too. If you ask, folks say, "Oh, there's a whole bunch of things out there," and I think it would be wonderful to be able to do that. But I think we'll have to sort of make those decisions as we go too.
I have a couple of questions. I have to say I was surprised by how low the number of people that take AP was. Maybe that's because of I was actually shocked by that, because I would actually argue that foreign language passing out is one of the best benefits of.
Absolutely.
Because you don't have to do it in college typically. I mean, so anyway, I was surprised by that. So I don't know if it's about the requirement of adding a third year, just encouraging more kids to take it, because anyway, that's just more of a surprise. But the turnover. So I don't know if this is a myth or true, but the previous superintendent used to say there was higher turnover in the foreign language staff. Is that true? And was that talked about at all?
It wasn't talked about through the committee, and this is only my second year as the department head, so I can't really speak to that, but Allison might be able to speak to it better than I can.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I would say anecdotally, we've had more turnover there than in some other places. Sometimes that's just happenstance. So I do feel like we have a good year kind of coming up. We've had some more stability this year and last year, and I think I'm glad we did the review when we did. I think things are feeling really great right now, and we're looking forward to kind of what happens moving forward, because it is, it's hard when you're to kind of stabilize a program when there's a lot of churn. So.
My final comment, and this may go back to the visioning and strategic plan, is I've been through a few of these curriculum reviews, and inevitably there's an ask for oftentimes more resources, and oftentimes more time. And actually the resources might be easier than the time. And so, we had the wellness last year, and it was the same thing. So I'm struck by a little bit at some point strategies about making choices, and, anyway, so that's it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I would echo that, right? And I think that one of the things is I think about how we will develop the next iteration of our district strategy.
Yeah.
One of the things that has struck me is that we, had strategic priorities, or we had strategic areas. We talked about them for 3 years, and we developed annual strategic priorities. What I am looking to do with this next iteration is actually say, as we roll out the plan, here is our plan for the next 3 to 4 years. Here's what the implications are. If we want to get here 3 years from now, here's the steps that we need to do in years 1 and 2 to accomplish that. And then we reassess on an annual basis, right? Because if funding fluctuates, if staffing fluctuates, if priorities change, then we have the ability to make that change. But I think there is a natural confluence between saying we're looking to do this in the next 3 to 5 years, and saying we're going to develop a strategy that actually maps out the steps for the next X number of years to make that happen.
I will say, that issue of time, particularly for elementary expansion, is something we talked about. I think it's, there's just a lot to get done in an elementary school day. But, the nice thing about foreign language study is this, or world language study, is this consistency thing matters. So if you're able to carve out a portion of time, even as we talked about, a half an hour, on a really regular basis, and you do instruction right, you can get a lot of mileage out of frequent touch points that are smaller number of minutes. So.
Thank you.
All right, any other comments? Thank you both. This was really
Thank you.
helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you, Hillary. Thank you, Ellen.
Thank you.
And so the last thing, just before we transition out of superintendent's report, and this is hot off the presses as of earlier today, is that today, this is a press release I'm reading from, May 8th, yesterday, May 8th, 9:10 a.m. The Recording Academy and Grammy Museum announced a total of 215 music teachers as quarterfinalists for the 2025 Music Educator Award. These 215 educators were chosen from more than 2,400 initial nominations, and Westwood High School's own Rob Goldman is one of the quarterfinalists recognized. So congratulations to him.
That's amazing.
And good luck in the next phase. So,
Wow.
Thank you, Joanna, for flagging that just before the meeting, and certainly happy to share that because it's great news to share. So.
All right, so we are going to move into public participation. Every year, we need to review the school choice, the policy regarding school choice. We have to hold a public hearing session, and then we'll vote on it later in the meeting during our action items. Tim, can you bring us up to speed about school choice?
Yeah, so basically the Mass General Law states that school choice, the default is to engage in school choice. This would mean that we would accept students from other communities. We would get a small amount of tuition if we have spots available. That being said, there is Westwood has never participated in school choice. It'd be my recommendation that Westwood continue not participating in school choice, especially even if there were a conversation to have. I think it would be not responsible to do that as we're going through this master planning study that's going to be based upon what our enrollment is. So it'd be my recommendation to the committee that we not engage in school choice. But we have to vote explicitly to not engage, and then submit that to the Department of Education, of Elementary and Secondary Education.
Thank you. And then I'd like to open the floor for public participation. If any members of the public would like to come address the committee, now is the time. Seeing no one, so we will move right along. So moving into school committee updates. I don't have much in terms of the chair update. I do want to remind everybody that we're accepting submissions for the Deerfield Reuse Working Group, and as I think Mayor Tim mentioned, we've had a ton of interest in that, so that's really exciting to see that there's so many members of the community that are eager to get involved. And also just a reminder that the school committee is holding office hours next Thursday morning at 9:30. So thank you to Maya and Tony for being there during that time. Are there liaison reports that anybody would like to share?
I just wanted to mention, and I don't know if it's officially a liaison situation or not, but that you and I had met with Tim regarding the smartphone topic.
Yes. Yep.
And I think more to come on that
on the
in
agenda, yeah.
the forthcoming week or so. Oh,
Yeah, it's on the
We're
agenda.
going to talk about it.
oh, great. Okay, perfect. I didn't see that. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
It's been a long week with my husband.
Tim,
out of town.
no, Tim's going to update us.
Awesome. And I also didn't know if, because it's your last meeting, if you wanted to give a final update about Legislative Council and all that you've accomplished this year, because it's been a great year.
Absolutely.
ready.
So this year we really focused on 3 key aims, which we identified at the beginning of the year. And that was 1, how do we make Westwood High School a stronger community where all students feel part of something larger? Number 2, how do we improve students' experiences in the building? As we believe in order to have a strong community, students must be able to feel that they can have positive experiences at school and be willing to stay on campus. And the 3rd aim we wish to address was how do we uplift student voices and encourage greater social responsibility? For the first one, we have talked rigorously and legislative council on students' experiences with spirit days, how students feel connected across grades, and we were able to conduct a lot of surveys on this matter and have discussions with administration such as Ms. Davenport. In terms of student experiences, 2 key areas we identified were food as well as furniture and space, and working with students to understand what their concerns were there and what policies we may advocate for. We've met with Chef D to communicate some of these, and students have already been extremely happy with the direction that school lunch has gone, and we're very excited to see, especially with the capital improvement plan, where school furniture and additional spaces are, as we believe students are really looking outside of class for places where they can collaborate with peers and have spaces, especially during high demand times such as lunch, that they can get work done. And we've also collaborated with other groups such as the Women's Activism Club to ensure that with equity through products such as menstrual products for females. And the last aim that we had was to empower student voices, and we've done a lot of work presenting student government to freshmen and ensuring that students understand the process and have ways that they can get involved. We've run mock elections for students, notably with the primary a couple months ago, so that students can also have a taste of what the voting process is like. We've done greater outreach with students through social media and flyers to show them that they can come to any legislative council meeting we have and express their views. And we are also looking at recycling. We collected a lot of data a couple weeks ago, and we're looking forward to start even with maybe labels on trash cans so that students can better understand what the school policy is toward that and ways they get involved in. We hope that with a lot of the data we've collected this year, we can set the foundation for future LC leaders to make some of our missions and visions happen in the coming years, and we're excited for what's going to come.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have heard about the food.
Absolutely.
I mean, I've heard actually other parents, not just my own child, talking about how much improved it is. So it's made a big difference.
Very good.
I have to say, I think it was last year's group that really started to talk about the food and met with the previous chef and did some surveying. And I think, Amy, you came and I didn't even realize it had happened, but you were like, the salad bar's back, right? So that was a huge boon to your efforts as a legislative council. I mean, it's fantastic. People are much happier.
Yeah, I would say on my part that I also really benefited from looking at the survey data, and we've shared that with Chef D, and he's reviewing it in detail to look, because there's a lot of feedback in those answers, including suggestions about menu items that students want to see, and so he's looking at that to inform the menu coming in the next few months.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's great work.
I have one. Go ahead. You go ahead.
From a PTO liaison report, I just wanted to give great kudos to all the PTOs out there who are acknowledging Teacher Appreciation Week this week. They're doing a tremendous job of recognizing our teachers, making them feel special, celebrating their good work, which is also a celebration of our teachers. And thank you to our teachers for doing their great work. So it's all of us. And on the Rob Goldman, I just wanted to also call attention to this week's Westwood Living article. Both Rob Goldman, his wife Caitlin, and Ken Rosario from the preschool are all featured in Westwood Living as performers and part of the Summer Stars program. Summer Stars is a summer performing arts camp for children who come from underserved music programs in their community. And so this was a celebration fundraiser for that effort, and they were all there, and it's just amazing the kind of service that our teachers do in the community, but then also, they're so talented. And anyway, so I just wanted to call that out. But also thank you to the PTOs for doing all their work for Teacher Appreciation Week.
Thanks. Just want to make a few comments about the budget. It was approved, as you know, so I want to thank all the residents that came out in an eventful Monday night, and as well as the capital articles. I think just is reflecting on, kind of the year's chair. I think, the last couple of years we've had some benefit from some one-time items. I think Chapter 70 one year, this year the Pine Hill consolidation. I think going forward we're going to have to be very mindful of my senses, given where the town is, as well as where I think a lot of the residents are. of kind of the budget, and particularly I think we're going to have to be very thoughtful about our contractual obligations going forward, and we look at those. So it's just my reflections, not to be the bearer of bad news, but I think it's, it was a good year. I think we have a great budget, but I think going forward, as I reflect, we'll have to be very mindful of those. So.
Yeah, I think it's worth noting that the budget passed by 7 votes,
Right.
which is way too close for comfort. So I think, to your point, we really need to, think about what our priorities are and how to best get there. I also think that we might be able to benefit maybe next year at town meeting from a little explanation to the members of town meeting about what our priorities were and how we built the budget. I know it's one budget, it's one town budget, but maybe we can work with the town to provide a little context. I think that would be helpful.
That's a good point. Anything else? Thank you. So Tim, I'll hand it back over to you.
Yeah, we'll move to creation of the task force on cell phone use in schools. And so I'm going to actually put the memo that I've written here up on the screen. And so we started to discuss this at the April school committee meeting about a growing interest in having a community conversation. By the way, I should also mention too, I used the word cell phones in this memo. I think probably a better phrase is internet-enabled devices, because it's not just cell phones, it's smartwatches, and some other things. But for the sake of this conversation, I'll just say cell phones, because that's a lot quicker to say than internet-enabled devices. So obviously we know there's a growing research base about the impact of cell phones and social media on children and their development, and we want to make sure that we have strong, vibrant, respectful learning communities for all of our students in the district. And so I'm proposing that we create a task force on the use of internet-enabled devices in schools that will include people from across the community. Proposing a composition of the task force that I would be on there, assistant superintendent, director of technology, learning, innovation, looking for a building administrator from each level, looking for a teacher, professional staff member, so that might include a mental health professional, like a psychologist or an adjustment counselor, or a guidance counselor from each level, looking for a parent or guardian from each level, looking for 3 students to participate. I would love to have the director of Westwood Youth and Family Services be a part of this, and I think 2 school committee members would be a part as well. This would be a task force that I would create as superintendent to make sure that we could have some really good conversation about this. We would have an initial meeting this spring with the idea that people that are part of this would have some homework to do over the summer. I think there would be a value in having a common learning experience. My initial thoughts are we might all read Anxious Generation, which I think some people, clearly that's been getting a lot of conversation around this. And so I think doing that would provide at least a common background for us to have some really in-depth conversations in the fall. And then we would really begin the work in earnest in the fall. The purpose of this task force would be to establish some guidelines and then to use those guidelines to help inform policy determinations at the school level, or if appropriate at the district level with the committee. I think at the school level this is reflected in things like student handbooks. I think that's really probably what the right venue is. But if there is something that has a district level policy implication, certainly that we could use those guidelines to recommend that as well. Given the fact that I have put a lot of emails out recently about being parts of a lot of groups, I would recommend that I don't send this out tomorrow, knowing that we are still trying to get people for the other groups, so I might delay until those other groups are established before I send this out. But the idea to have one meeting probably in June, give people some homework for the summertime, some good beach reading, and then come back and hit the ground running in the fall. So with that being said, I'm happy to entertain any comments or questions or feedback or suggestions about how to make this better for members of the committee, because I think it's too important not to have this kind of conversation collectively, knowing that while the schools are not the sole determining factor for how this rolls out in a community, we can take the lead in some ways on trying to set the tone for how we respond appropriately as a community. So with that being said, I will turn the floor over to all of you.
Yeah, thank you for putting this together. I mean, we met, obviously, I think this is a fantastic idea. I do there are a lot of moving pieces and parts right now, so I do wonder if maybe we need to put some sort of visual together about the 3 separate pieces that are kind of ongoing, or will be ongoing, perhaps, so that folks understand the distinction between them and what each of the expected outcomes and purposes. Because you're right, we're asking for a lot of input, which is fantastic, but I know it can be it can get lost in, especially heading into the lead up to the end of school where lots is going on. But I've received many, people stopping me in the grocery store and at the gym and calling me regarding the smartphone piece since we discussed it at the last meeting. And I think, I'm hearing a lot of positive feedback. I think there are, some concerns that we'll address during the task force conversations as well. But by and large, I think this is the right direction for us to head.
Thank you.
I wondered if there was a benefit. I see the Director of Westwood Youth and Family Services as a possibility, and that would be amazing. I wonder if in addition to, or instead of, or if this person isn't available, if we solicit feedback from other mental health professionals that work in the community with children.
Yeah.
Psychologists, psychiatrists who have insight into our children's population. I can think of a number of professionals who serve a lot of the children in our district who probably have things to say about this.
Yeah, I would imagine, and I mean, there may be scenarios too where we are bringing in, parents or guardians who kind of could serve that dual role also,
Right.
who may have the professional expertise to bring to bear on top of their role as a family member in the community. So.
I want to say thank you, Tim, for your quick action on this. I know, we brought it up last fall and brought it up again last meeting, and it's so exciting to see it coming to fruition and that we're actually going to make some progress with it. So I'm really excited, so thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it.
All right. Do you want to move into the policy manual?
Yeah, so let's move into some outstanding policies from the policy manual review. So prior to me coming on board, obviously the committee had gone through a major review of the overall school committee policy manual. There were a few policies that were still outstanding. So this would be a first reading of addressing these outstanding policies. I will say that we are not looking to make any sort of like wholesale substantive changes. We just kind of want to clear the deck, get things resolved, and then if there are still other iterations that we want to change going forward, then we can have that conversation and that's fine. First one is student transportation, private vehicles. So what we are proposing here is a mixture of the previous Westwood policy and the model MASC policy, making sure that we meet our obligations and that the policy is implementable, right? So I think one of the concerns that was raised before was about like shall and liability coverage if this is happening. This basically, we've changed the policy to say evidence of personal liability coverage upon request, so that if we suspect, then there's a reason, but we don't have to. We want to make sure that we actually have a policy we can implement, right? So, and I don't know if you want me to sort of present all of them or if you want me to pause on each one if there are any questions or comments from the committee.
Do you want to present all of them and then we can go through with questions at the end?
That's fine.
Okay. The second one is about fuel efficient vehicle program. I am actually recommending that we eliminate the policy, not because we don't believe in fuel efficient vehicles, but this is really should be something that is operational guidelines and not in policy. Because if things change in terms of what a fuel efficient vehicle is, the process of changing the policy is too cumbersome. And so we want to make sure that we're nimble. So the recommendation would just be to eliminate that as a policy in the manual altogether. Policy EEER transportation. Again, reflects a mixture of both the previous existing transportation policy and the model MASC policy language, and reflects current practice in the district, where we set the limits at 1.5 miles for transportation. The piece here is that like our previous policy differentiated between K and 1 and 2 through 12, which is not what practice actually is. So we wanted to make sure that we were reflective of current practice, knowing that, and I just want to call this out under eligibility, we have a parcel map to determine which parcels are eligible for transportation. The exceptions are considered for hazardous areas. With this policy, we are not looking to change our existing transportation eligibility map. This just codifies what we have in place. There may or may not come a time in the future when we need to review that map as a whole. I don't think this is the time. I just want to make sure that we have a policy that's reflective of our practice. But if that's something that we want to engage in at a committee level or at a district level and then bring to the committee, we would have the flexibility to be able to do that in the future. Private tutoring for pay, basically because of the changes in the state ethics law, we need to make sure that we have a policy that is reflective and responsive to what our legal requirements are to comply with the state ethics law. And so I'm recommending that we adopt the model MASC policy language that is there. And then finally, access to digital resources. In the time between the school committee's policy manual review that completed last June. And now MASC revised all of their model policies language around this. Actually broke IJND into 3 separate policies: access to digital resources, use of technology and instruction, and acceptable use of digital resources. It's my recommendation at this point in time, just as a bridge, that we adopt this revision as the model MSC policy language. If there is something that warrants further discussion, particularly after the task force on the cell phone work is complete, then we can have that conversation. But at least this makes sure that we have something compliant with what the recommended changes are right now. So with that being said, I'm happy to entertain, or any of us are happy to entertain, any questions from the committee about these policies as presented.
So I have some comments on the bus policy.
Yeah.
So here's, and I talked to Lev a little bit about this today. Here's where I think there's a challenge. We have a policy that says 1.5 miles, and then a policy map that has a lot of exceptions that were established 20 years ago, or at least 20 years ago, we think. So I'm not going to suggest we go through a massive look at the policy map that will take a lot of time, but I would think there should be some process noted in the policy where if somebody who's in a walking zone has a legitimate, whatever, safety, whatever you want to call it, the conditions here we talk about, safety or hazardous safety. That there's something called out of the policy that there is a process for that. Because there were people that came forward about a year ago and we committed to them that we would, I think, address this, and this policy doesn't address that process. It doesn't address that process because I don't know, at least I don't know what the process is.
Yeah, so right now the process is there's an appeal to the Director of Finance and Operations, and that decision is made. If there is a will for the committee to bring this forward in a second reading, I can propose a revision. It's something that I've used in the past, right? And I will admit that I stole it from, I think, Bridgewater Raynham, it was the first place that I had seen this. And so one way to address this is you actually develop a transportation eligibility appeal board. That where I was, it was comprised of 3 members. It was because it shouldn't be the superintendent, because the superintendent's job is to make sure the policy is followed, and it can't be the Director of Finance and Operations because they're the one that makes the initial determination. So it falls on the assistant superintendent because that's really the other person that's left, and you're not going to be here, so you're fine with me proposing this. But so in my case, it was the assistant superintendent, it was the town police department safety officer, and it was we had a couple of parents that we sort of rotated through, right? So there was sort of a parent, somebody from the police department who could assess safety conditions, and somebody who represented the district. An appeal would be made. There were criteria for why an appeal could be made: miscalculation of distance, documented safety considerations. That appeal board would hear the appeal, make a determination that would establish a precedent for that region, that parcel, that neighborhood, whatever it was. So if there's an appetite for the committee for me to propose that kind of language, I can certainly do that, and then we can have further discussion on the second reading around this. But I just sort of want to gauge the will of the committee about putting that forward.
Sorry, I don't think I'm familiar with the feedback that you received about this. Can you just explain?
So there was, well, it's not about, it was a year ago that there was some residents that came forward with some safety concerns, basically, about, and I won't get into particular area, it's not really important, but a particular area where they didn't think it was safe for them kids to walk. That's kind of, so there was, I mean, what's the process if somebody really feels that way? It's kind of what I'm raising here.
And what is the current process?
So to give you like a little bit of specifics about that situation without going too deeply in it, there was a concern about a street crossing.
Oh, okay.
And that was the parents' objection. I spoke to the Westwood Police Department. They assured me that there's always a crossing guard at that crossing, and the crossing guard has been really superb. Knows the crossing, knows all the kids, is there very early. There's not a concern about like training there, and they felt confident that it was a safe crossing. So with that information, I determined that there was no action needed, but I did speak honestly to a parent that we were going to be, talking about, because the parent asked me, what's my recourse? Like, what if I'm not satisfied with that answer? Can I go to the school committee? Was her question. And so I said, well, the school committee will talk about policy. We were up to renew this policy, and so I said we're waiting for that. After we renew the policy, then we can revisit whether that's the next thing to do. So we left it there. But usually it would end with me, and there isn't really much more except to write to a school committee member, or write to the superintendent, and ask for someone to overrule me there. But that's the extent of what we do.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, and if we were to form this sort of appeal board, how often per year would it be invoked?
Yeah, so my experience with that, because where I was, I had it for probably about 4-ish years. I think we developed it just before COVID, and then I kind of forgot everything that happened sort of in the interim. When we first established it, there were a number of things that came forward. Typically we would say that it has to be submitted within X number of days at the start of the year or something like that, so you're not hearing things all, or if a family has just moved in, right, then there's a new situation that's presented. One of the things that we also said is if a decision is made about a neighborhood, it establishes a precedent for that neighborhood so that it isn't reappealed every year unless there's a documented change of conditions, right? So it might be that there are there's construction work that is making sidewalks inaccessible or something like that, right? That would certainly be something that would mean it would re-justify looking at it. We get a couple a year. It was kind of all after the initial year. There was kind of and this was a bigger community, fewer sidewalks in the community than there are here, bigger geographic community, right? There were some other things related to that. But yeah, we'd maybe have a couple a year after that first year.
And for context, in my experience here, we have not had a lot of parents appealing for reconsideration on their eligibility for their parcel, in part because we do also allow, when there is room on the bus, we allow people to apply to get a seat and pay for a seat if we can manage that stop. It's, so where it gets tricky is when it's really difficult to add a stop, or the bus would have to do, a large loop, right? Something that would really be inconvenient or make the route not feasible, and they're in a walker zone, then it's really a firm no, and I can't do much about it. If I confirm that the safety issue is not a safety issue, then it remains a no. But there are so many walkers that we do accommodate because it ends up not being difficult to accommodate them within the route. And that's why we don't get a lot of these concerns, or not a lot of disappointment in my years.
I think part of the challenge is this parcel map was literally developed, we think, 20+ years ago.
Yes,
So
I
you
think
can-
it's 22 years ago.
So you can look, not to get into specifics, but the complaint we had, you look, they said, well, why does this neighborhood have it? They have better sidewalk than we, so we can get into this
Yeah.
map that was developed in
Yeah.
a different era, so anyway.
Yeah, and I think to that point, right, the policy is separate from the map.
Yeah.
And I think they're parallel but separate conversations, right? So I am hearing at least an appetite to put something forward for the committee to consider regarding like a more established appeal process. And so I can certainly include that for a second reading.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I think that makes sense.
My question was related to the policy surrounding tutoring. I know when we did the overhaul of all of the policies last spring, the reason we kind of held on this is because it is an impactful change, specifically related to the inability to use classrooms for private tutoring, and I completely understand why that has to be. When will that go into effect?
I mean, it would go into effect once the school committee passes it, right? So I think the
Okay.
idea is that we could do the first two readings, May, June, with a third and final reading and vote for adoption during our summer retreat, which would mean it would go into effect for the beginning of next school year.
Okay, so tutors and families could kind of plan for that. Okay.
Can I
We
see
could
it?
also, sorry, we could also waive the third reading.
Yeah, that's another option too, right? At the committee, because I'm making the recommendation we do that for the graduation requirements tonight, but the committee could also choose to waive the third reading if they wanted to
Yeah,
and
I
vote
mean-
publicly in June.
We do that a fair
That
amount.
makes sense.
Yep.
Thinking about this particular policy, not to get in the weeds here, but is it the school of the teacher or the school of the student? Let's say you have a high school student being tutored by a middle school teacher. If the middle school teacher comes to the high school, or if the student comes to the middle school, is that a conflict?
Essentially, the issue is yes, because as a teacher in the district, they have access to resources that the general public does not.
Okay.
And that's the conflict with the state ethics law.
Got it.
So I think it would be any school building.
Any school.
Yeah.
Any.
If it's necessary to clarify at that level, we might want to
Yeah, we
clarify.
can have that on an individual basis.
I mean, reading it, I was like, huh,
Yeah.
that's a question I had.
I like this wording better because I think what we had before, it did seem like it could, we have a number of teachers who facilitate the mini courses after school, and I think what we had before read a little bit
It
like it
did.
could rub up against the mini course,
Right.
Which is
Yeah, that's a very
fun,
different
not
thing.
a tutoring thing.
Yeah.
It's
Right.
a fun
Right.
thing. It's learning languages and things like that. So.
Any other comments or questions?
So the only revision I'm hearing is including the appeal process and the transportation policy. Okay. Thank you.
And then we need to do the second reading of the revision to the graduation requirements.
Yeah, so this was presented last time. There's no change in what's presented this evening. Again, as a reminder, this is the proposed policy revision that would change the public speaking graduation requirement to a financial literacy graduation requirement for the class of 2026 and beyond. I know we had sent it out for feedback from the community. I think the feedback that we saw was overwhelmingly positive. One person did kind of question, we would have been nice to know this before course elections happen. The reality is we didn't know we can do this until course elections happen. Otherwise, we certainly would have tried to publicize this earlier. So.
And just to clarify, because I gave an update electronically to the Thurston PTO last night. I may have misspoke. This is going into effect for class of 2026, correct? So 2025 will, if they don't elect to take financial literacy, will not take financial literacy.
That's correct, right? Because typically the civics and public speaking components are addressed through a child's junior year, their student's junior year.
Yeah, so they've already taken.
So they've already taken it. So we didn't want to do
civics.
anything that would retroactively impact students that have passed that window.
Okay, so I think I misspoke in a couple of PTO meetings there. Apologies for that. I said class of 2025.
Yeah.
Do we have to actually read this?
I don't think we actually need to read it. No.
Being right along. So action items, we do need to vote regarding the participation in school choice, which Tim had mentioned during discussion items. So would somebody be kind enough to read the school choice vote verbiage?
I'll do this again.
Thank you, Dory.
Second year in a row. Okay. Whereas the Educational Reform Act of 1993 requires that the enrollment of non-resident students under the school choice provision, unless the committee votes by June 1 not to participate, and whereas the school choice provision reallocates funds from the sending district and awards such funds to the receiving district, and whereas the maximum reimbursement allowed by the school choice provision is less than Westwood's per pupil expenditure, which means Westwood Public Schools would be required to subsidize each choice student, and whereas once Westwood accepts a choice student, Westwood must keep such student through graduation, regardless of whether Westwood's demographic situation has changed, and whereas it is likely that a number of students will return to their sending districts or otherwise leave Westwood, thus creating a potential income loss, now hereby be it resolved that the Westwood School Committee respectfully declines to participate in the school choice program, provided, however, that if surrounding school districts subsequently and prior to June 1 decide to accept the provisions of school choice, the Westwood School Committee reserves the right to do likewise in order to protect its fiduciary interests in this matter.
Thank you, Dory. So I guess we have to do a roll call vote. So can somebody?
You need a second.
move
I'll
it?
second.
I'm in favor.
I think you call the name.
Oh, sorry. Maya Plotkin,
Yes.
Dory Parmalee,
Yes.
Joanna French.
Yes.
Tony Mullen.
Yes.
I'm a yes.
Thank you.
All right. And would somebody like to vote to waive the final reading and adopt the revised policy on graduation requirements?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. And then if I can just introduce the last agenda item. So this was alluded to during the world language curriculum review, but I'm happy that I'm bringing forward to the committee, or we are bringing forward to the committee, I shouldn't say I, approval of international field trips starting at the end of the 2024-25 school year. In your memo here, you have I've linked to other things that are in here, but I'm going to pull up the memo that Amy Davenport, principal of the high school, wrote to me. And I'm just kind of going to go to the highlights here. So we are looking to bring forward a number of international travel opportunities for students. The first of these would be a J-term trip in 2025. I'm happy to share that we're collaborating with EF Educational Tours based out of Cambridge, a company that I've had experience with previously. They do great work, and we have teachers at the high school that are really interested in getting these opportunities going again. So the first trip would be in J-term 2025. It would be a service-based learning trip to the Dominican Republic for students in grades 9 through 11, where students are actually doing service projects in the community. They don't exactly know what they're doing until, pretty soon beforehand, so that is an authentic service thing and not, there are some places where the service trip is you repaint the same wall. Every group that comes in every month repaints the same wall. That's not what this is. This is an authentic service, so we want to make sure that we're reflective of the community's needs. But this will be done in J-term 2025. There'd be a July 2025 trip through EF. There'd be a travel-based learning trip to Western Europe for students in grades 9 through 11. I believe the itinerary is tentatively London, Paris, Florence, Rome for students to go. Those are the two that I'm asking the committee to vote on this evening. In addition, I'm happy that Westwood has had an agreement with Bridgewater State for a number of years for students to travel abroad, graduated seniors to go abroad to Oxford, England to study. We are not asking for the committee's approval because this is not a formal Westwood Public Schools trip, because the students are graduated. They are not our students at this point. So we are supportive of the opportunity. I'm happy that this will come back in summer of 2025, because next year's seniors will not have the opportunity to participate in our trips because they will have been graduated at that point. But this opportunity will be there for other students, and then would continue in 2026 and beyond. And then not yet ready for your approval will be a spring, April 2026 learning trip to Central Europe focused around World War II. I believe the tentative itinerary is Berlin, Budapest, Prague, and Krakow. So excited to bring back these opportunities for students, and would be very happy to have the committee vote to approve these this evening so we can start publicizing. And Sean, sorry that sorry this is coming too late for you, but
I think this is great. Before we vote, I just have a couple questions.
sure, absolutely.
Specifically on the Europe tour in the West. How many kids are able to take advantage of this?
Yeah, so it's going to depend upon interest, right? We have to make sure that we scale up chaperones appropriately. I believe it's for every 6 students, there's 1 chaperone that's a part, right? So we don't know yet until we see how many sign up. I mean, basically the capacity is the size of the bus. I believe the bus is like 30-ish. If we fill a bus, that's phenomenal. I don't think that will necessarily happen first time out of the gate. If not, we get paired with another district or another school that we would travel with. But it's really, we want to make sure that we maintain that ratio, right? So that we have the appropriate level of chaperone supervisory responsibilities for students.
And when you say chaperone, is that provided by EF Education or parents?
No, that's our staff.
Okay.
Yeah, no,
Staff
I mean,
from districts.
the intention is that we want this to be our staff as much as possible. So we have a lead teacher identified for each of these trips that are being proposed. And then part of their job is to recruit their colleagues to join them in chaperone.
Oh, so you don't need parent volunteers?
We, while I understand there may be desire for some level of parent volunteers, right? Because it is our trip, we have a level of liability and responsibility. Best to have our staff involved if we can be.
And the same with, same with J-term, right? We
Same
don't
with
know
J-term,
numbers.
yeah.
Okay.
Just trying to think of it in terms of with an equity lens. I would imagine these trips are pretty expensive. So are there, or maybe you haven't gotten this far yet, but are there is there fundraising opportunities or scholarships available?
Yeah, so that's one of the things is that we are going to look at how we can develop those opportunities for fundraising and potentially use some community resources to try to steer towards supporting equitable access to these trips for students, right? Okay. Yeah. That is part of our, we don't have those details. We need to make sure that a trip is approved before we can talk about what fundraising looks like. Okay. But that's certainly on our radar without question.
And EF seems like a great vendor. I mean, I think you know about some of the history with our previous.
Yeah, I do.
vendors, so
It's
not to get into that, but yeah, that sounds like a really.
Yeah, I mean, I again, I have some previous experience working with them, and I think everybody had some things during COVID and trips, and that kind of is what it is. And I know they revamped their policies around cancellation because of sort of what happened in February 2020. So
exciting.
Does somebody want to move to vote to approve the field trips?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great. And is there any new business that anybody would like to raise? Nothing? No? Excellent. Excellent. Okay, so we do need to move to go in, I'm sorry. We need somebody to suggest that we go into, make a motion to go into executive session.
I move school committee goes into executive session to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation. If an open meeting, because, I don't know if this is worded right, if an open, because the open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body, and I believe we will not return to open session.
Correct.
Other than to adjourn.
Well, we usually adjourn.
Yeah, legally, we have to actually come back and vote to go out of executive session, then vote to adjourn after we come out of executive session. But,
Interesting.
Oh, okay. So
yeah, it's open meeting laws.
We've never done that.
Yeah. Oh, I can start
Shouldn't
now.
announce that in the meeting.
All right. So we'll just go right into executive session then. Okay.
Yeah, so she
Second.
seconded.
All in favor?
We need a roll call vote to go into executive session.
Oh,
Sorry.
I guess we need a roll call vote. Maya Plotkin,
Yes.
Dory Parmalee,
Yes.
Joanna French,
Aye.
Tony
Yes.
Mullen, and I
Thank
support
you.
it.
Thank you. All right, good luck.